She picked up the phone, called his agent, and said he's fired. Not after a long debate, not after weeks of tension. One incident, one decision. Carol Burnett, the woman who built television's most beloved comedy empire on kindness and collaboration, drew a hard line, and someone on her own cast crossed it. But here's what nobody talks about. What actually pushed her to that moment? And why, even after everything, the truth is far more complicated than the headlines suggest. The answer will surprise you. Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal changes everything you thought you knew about Carol Burnett. The phone call that changed everything. It was the 7th season. The Carol Burnett Show was at the height of its power. 30 million viewers every week, a cast that audiences treated like family, and rehearsals that were as fun as the show itself. And yet, something had quietly gone wrong on that set. People were walking carefully. Guest stars, already nervous about stepping into an established group, were leaving rehearsals visibly shaken. The energy that Burnett had spent years building had shifted. The laughter that normally filled those rehearsal rooms had thinned, and the cause was someone nobody expected. Harvey Korman was one of the most gifted sketch performers in television history. His timing was nearly perfect. His range, from broad slapstick to quiet character work within a single scene, was remarkable. Week after week, he made 30 million people laugh without making it look like any effort at all. The audience loved him. Burnett loved him too, which is exactly what made what happened next so striking. According to Burnett's own memoir, In Such Good Company, published in 2016, Korman had been behaving rudely toward guest stars and fellow cast members during rehearsals. The exact details were never laid out publicly in full, but the pattern was clear enough. Whether it was stress from the relentless pace of weekly television, personal frustration, or simple impatience, the result on set was the same. The atmosphere was breaking down, and Burnett noticed. For her, this was never just about one bad week or one difficult personality. Guest performers came onto her set in a vulnerable position. They were stepping into an already established group, a group with years of shared history, private jokes, and an almost instinctive chemistry. That was intimidating under the best conditions. When someone on the inside made it worse, it was not just unpleasant, it was a betrayal of everything the show stood for. Burnett believed that the success of the Carol Burnett Show was not built on individual talent alone. It was built on trust, on the understanding that every person who walked onto that stage, whether a series regular or a first-time guest, would be treated with the same respect. That was not a suggestion. It was the foundation. So she acted. She confronted Korman directly. The conversation was not soft or diplomatic. It was clear and firm. She told him what she had seen and what it had done to the people around him. And then she went a step further. She picked up the phone, called his agent, and said that Harvey Korman was being let go from the show. That single phone call sent a message to every person on that set. No one is above this standard. Not the most talented, not the most beloved, not the person the audience tuned in specifically to watch. The standard applied to everyone, or it applied to no one. But here is what nobody expected. Korman did not push back. He did not call his lawyers or go to the press or deny what had happened. He sat with it. He reflected on what Burnett had said and on how his behavior had affected the people around him. And then he did something that, in the world of high-pressure television production, was genuinely rare. He apologized, not in a calculated career-protecting way, genuinely. When he returned to the set the following week, something in him had shifted. The sharpness was gone. the warmth that audiences saw on screen, the easy, almost brotherly chemistry between Corman and Burnett returned to the rehearsal room as well. And the show continued. The chemistry held. And the millions of viewers who tuned in every week never had any idea how close it had all come to falling apart. The threat of firing did not destroy their relationship. In many ways, it deepened it. After that moment, both of them knew something important. Burnett's loyalty was not unconditional, and Corman's respect for the show was real enough to survive being tested. What this moment reveals is something the audience never fully saw. Carol Burnett was not just a performer. She was a leader, one who held everyone, including her most beloved co-stars, to the same standard she held herself to. And on a set built entirely on warmth, that willingness to be hard when it mattered most was what kept the warmth alive. The friend she quietly stopped calling. Some riffs do not begin with a fight, and they begin with silence. Vicki Lawrence was 17 years old when Carol Burnett discovered her. She had written Burnett a letter mentioning that people often told her she resembled the star. Burnett was charmed enough to meet her, and what she found was a teenager with real comedic instincts and genuine stage presence. Burnett brought Lawrence onto the show. She mentored her, guided her, and gave her increasing space as the years passed. Lawrence grew from a supporting player into a breakout star. Her character, Mama, became so popular, it eventually led to its own long-running sitcom, Mama's Family. For years, their bond looked almost familial. Then the early 1980s arrived, and everything quietly fell apart. Burnett's marriage to television producer Joe Hamilton ended after more than 2 decades. Hamilton had not only been her husband, so he had also been the producer of her show. Their personal and professional lives were deeply woven together. When that marriage collapsed, the fallout rippled outward through every relationship connected to that shared world. Lawrence, whose rise had been closely tied to Hamilton's productions, found herself without doing anything wrong caught inside that circle of distance. Burnett did not confront her. There was no dramatic scene. Instead, she simply withdrew. Communication between the two women grew sparse throughout the 1980s and continued that way into the 1990s. For fans who associated them with warmth and laughter, this chapter was invisible. But personally, it was a painful stretch, particularly for Lawrence, who had not caused the distance and could not fully explain it. Time, however, one has a way of softening what grief sharpens. As years passed, the two women reconnected. The foundation of what they had built together, the sketches, the tours, the formative years, proved stronger than the silence. They rebuilt their friendship on steadier ground than before. This chapter is perhaps the most human in Burnett's story. Even people known for warmth can close off under grief. And some relationships, the ones built on something real, survive the closing. When two legends met, the cameras were rolling. The audience was watching, and Carol Burnett was not laughing. That single detail said everything. By the 2000s, both Carol Burnett and Joan Rivers had earned permanent places in American comedy history. Their careers had run in parallel for decades, overlapping eras, shared audiences, late-night appearances, art and television specials spanning generations. On paper, they were peers. Two women who had broken barriers, outlasted critics, and reshaped what female comedians could do on screen. But parallel lines never actually meet. And beneath the surface of those overlapping careers lived two very different philosophies about what comedy was for. Burnett built her comedy on characters, ensemble chemistry, and emotional honesty. Her humor invited people in. It made audiences feel safe, like they were laughing with someone who genuinely liked them. Even her sharpest parodies carried warmth underneath. There was always a humanity to it, a sense that she cared about the people in the room, on the stage, and at home watching. Rivers built her persona on something entirely different: sharp edges, unapologetic frankness, a willingness to say the thing that polite company would never say out loud. Her jokes targeted plastic surgery, celebrity appearances, aging, and private relationships, including her own. She turned her personal pain into punchlines, and she did it without flinching. It was a style that thrived on discomfort, on pushing the audience just past the point of ease, and then releasing the tension with a laugh. It required a certain kind of nerve. Rivers had it in abundance. These were not incompatible styles in theory. Comedy has always had room for both warmth and edge, but in practice, they produced performers with very different instincts about what was acceptable to joke about, and more importantly, what was not. The encounter that drew public attention occurred on Joan and Melissa. Joan Knows Best, a reality series that followed Rivers and her daughter through their daily lives. In a filmed segment, Rivers approached Burnett while she was dining. The setup looked simple enough: two comedy legends, running into each other, sharing a moment on camera. What followed was something else entirely. Rivers moved into her natural mode almost immediately. She made jokes about plastic surgery. She touched on personal life. She leaned into the sharp, probing humor that had defined her act for decades. It was not malicious. It was simply how Rivers operated. For her, no topic was sacred. No person, including herself, was above the joke. Burnett responded, but the responses were measured, restrained, careful in a way that was impossible to miss. There was no playful sparring between equals, no shared laughter that built on itself, no moment where both women dropped their guard and simply enjoyed each other's company. The exchange had the unmistakable quality of two people choosing their words rather than speaking them freely. Polite, controlled, and underneath all of it, cool. Observers who watched the segment later noted that the interaction reflected a long-standing chill between the two performers. Not a documented feud, not a backstage confrontation anyone could point to. Just a steady, unspoken distance rooted in a fundamental difference in how each woman understood comedy's responsibilities. For Burnett, humor had boundaries, not rigid ones, but real ones. There were things you did not mind for laughs, particularly when the person being joked about was sitting right across from you and had not invited it. Rivers operated by a different code entirely. Every subject was available. That was the whole point. What made the moment stick was its rarity. In an industry where veteran performers almost always project warmth for the cameras, where two legends meeting on screen resolve predictably into affectionate reminiscence and mutual praise, this brief encounter stood apart. It did not resolve. It stayed exactly as uncomfortable as it began, and it stayed honest. That honesty, uncomfortable as it was, revealed more about both women than any staged reunion ever could have. The stage she helped build. There is a gap in television history that most people have never thought to question. But once you notice it, you cannot stop thinking about it. Saturday Night Live premiered in 1975, just 3 years before The Carol Burnett Show ended its run. In the decades since, SNL has hosted hundreds of guests from every corner of entertainment. Many of those comedians built their careers on ensemble sketch work, physical humor, and character-driven parody, the very things Burnett had pioneered years before SNL existed. And yet, Carol Burnett has never officially hosted Saturday Night Live. Not once. Burnett herself has acknowledged this publicly, and not always without a trace of frustration. She has noted that an invitation never came, and has speculated that her style, rooted in theatrical warmth, musical performance, and broad character immersion, may not align with the sharper, more topical sensibility that Lorne Michaels built SNL around. At one point, she raised the possibility that gender bias, particularly in the earlier decades of SNL's run, may have played a role. Granted, it was a measured observation rather than a direct accusation, but it was notable that she said it at all. The irony is hard to ignore. Many performers who shaped SNL's comedic language were influenced directly or indirectly by Carol Burnett. She helped create the template. She just never got to stand on the stage that was partly built on her foundation. That gap, whether it reflects industry politics, stylistic gatekeeping, or simple institutional blindness, remains, as Burnett herself put it, a curious thing. The woman behind the laughter. To understand why each of these moments mattered so deeply, you need to understand what Carol Burnett built and what protecting it meant to her. In 1967, CBS handed a primetime variety show to a woman, something the network had never done at that scale. Yet most executives believed audiences would not tune in to watch a female host anchor a major comedy program. They were wrong. The Carol Burnett Show ran for 11 seasons, won 25 Emmy Awards, and at its peak, drew more than 30 million viewers per episode. But the numbers only tell part of the story. What made the show different was the atmosphere Burnett created. She built a set where collaboration came first, where mistakes were laughed at, not punished, where guest stars felt as valued as series regulars. The ensemble Harvey Korman, Vicki Lawrence, Tim Conway, and Lyle Waggoner was not just a cast, it functioned as a family. Burnett was both the star and the producer. That dual role gave her real authority. She used it carefully almost always to protect people, to build them up, to create something honest on screen. Her comedy drew from a wide range: broad physical slapstick, quiet, emotionally precise character work, sharp parody of classic films and soap operas, musical performances shaped by serious Broadway training. Perhaps most distinctively, she ended every episode with a direct, heartfelt message to the audience. In an era of polished, scripted television, that simple habit created something rare, genuine intimacy. Viewers did not just watch Carol Burnett, they trusted her. That trust was not accidental. It was built week after week through consistency of character. And it explains why, when something threatened the values behind that show, she did not hesitate to act. The friendships that never broke. For all the tensions in Carol Burnett's story, there is another side, one that reveals just as much about who she is. Burnett has been clear over the years. She never experienced anything resembling a feud with Julie Andrews or Lucille Ball. On the contrary, she has described both women with a warmth that carries real weight. Her friendship with Julie Andrews dates back to the late 1950s, when both women were navigating the Broadway scene in New York. Rather than feeling competitive, Burnett was captivated by Andrews's talent and generosity. The two later collaborated on several televised specials, and the chemistry on screen reflected something real: two performers who genuinely enjoyed each other and deeply respected each other's craft. Burnett has spoken of Andrews as one of the most loyal friends she has ever had. The relationship with Lucille Ball carries a different kind of significance. Ball was not a peer, she was a predecessor, a woman who had already proven what female-led comedy could achieve before Burnett ever had her own show. Burnett has spoken openly about watching Ball on I Love Lucy as a young woman and finding it formative. Ball's physical comedy, her timing, her fearlessness, all of it left a deep mark. But Ball was more than a distant influence. She offered Burnett direct encouragement, and through Desilu Productions, She demonstrated that a woman in comedy could hold both creative and executive power, owning her show, running her company, and making her own choices. Carol Burnett did not become a legend by accident. She earned it through talent, yes, but more than that. And through the standards she held herself and everyone around her to. When someone on her set fell short, she acted. When a friendship grew complicated by grief, she stepped back. When industry doors stayed closed, she named it honestly and moved forward. What connects every story in today's video is not drama, it is principle. Carol Burnett has always known what she stands for, and she has never been quiet about it. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Did Carol Burnett make the right call when she picked up that phone? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. If this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. And share this with someone who grew up watching Carol Burnett. We will see you in the next one.